Hello, it's Krista here today. Um, so today I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about narcissistic abuse again and trauma bonding. Um, in my own experience, it is a really tough one to get through. It's a tough one to get by, and especially if you're still in the process of doing your own narcissistic abuse, domestic abuse recovery, being as you're still in a relationship, you still have not cut ties with that person, um, and that relationship just keeps you bouncing off the walls. Um, I know this is still a difficult one for me. If you've at all watched any of my videos, you'll understand that as I'm teaching about this, a lot of times I am going through it as well, being that I am still in the state of recovery from narcissistic abuse, and traumas that I've dealt with all my life from a young age, with narcissistic abusive parents, and which further down leads you to a path of relationships, usually like a pattern of abusive type men in your life, being even if they don't hurt you physically, they can use many other forms like physical, or mental, psychological manipulation, and control, whether they're using control over you with money, or whatever that may be, that keeps you bonded to that person. And with trauma bonding, what happens is a lot of times that person is going to be abusing you in a lot of different ways. At first everything's great when you're still in the honeymooning, love bombing stage. And then, but after that passes, they're going to start treating you in more of a critical way, like kind of making you feel like you're less than. Your ideas aren't good anymore. Maybe they don't like the way that you dress, the way that you cook. Just making little innuendos about this or that, just critically picking on maybe your children or things around them or people around them, like maybe picking on waitresses and waiters and different things, like nothing is ever good enough for them. These are red flags of narcissistic abuse, and when you do get into relationships with these, it's even harder to break away, because what they do is not only do they start devaluing, usually it ends up going into more destructive modes of how to traumatize their victim, and the more powerful and stronger they are to traumatize you, use things to traumatize you. Like maybe it's slamming a car door, or slamming their fist into a wall, or maybe not, just and keeping you, putting you into more of like a freeze mode, where they do like a violent outburst, or just like, traumatizing in larger ways like that, where it puts you into more of a freeze and puts you into that shock and further traumatizes you. There are smaller ways to traumatize, and then they usually gradually get to the point where they're just really just hurting you emotionally or whatever that can be. They can get to a super traumatic point, an extreme point where they are just extremely battering you emotionally, or calling you stupid and just different things like this, until it gets to the point where it leaves you utterly terrified. Often it leads them into narcissistic rages. Usually this is when the trauma happens the most, the heavier traumas. And what this does is, you know, all of a sudden, it just leaves you to this point where you know that you have to leave. Everything in your mind is telling you logically that you have to leave, you know, emotionally. Everything is telling you that it's time to go. This guy is bad news. I need to get out and I need to get away from him. And then you just cannot leave. And it can even, trauma bonding can even happen after you get out of the relationship. When you're living on your own. I'm suffering some of this as well right now, because it, you know, oftentimes you can get led back to your abuser and in that same position as before, because you have all these thoughts and like, not really, it's not really love. It's not really what you think it is. It's not really love, but it is more just like this emotional bond that you have formed with this person. And it makes you feel, it makes it feel like it's love, and you want to go back and you want to be with this person. And it is also addictions, chemical addictions in your brain that happens during this trauma period, where you can actually become addicted to trauma bonding after, you know, so long of it, maybe just, you know, a little while, or even if it's many years. I think the longer you are in these relationships, the harder it is to leave. That's why it is so much harder to leave, because of this trauma bonding. It is also called Stockholm Syndrome. I explained in one of my last videos about a situation in either the 60s or 70s where this bank got robbed. And one of the victims, after it was all over and the people left the prison that did the offenses, there was a couple women in there that decided they were going to have relationships with these men. And you know that it can't be love. I mean, you know, it was trauma bonding. It was called Stockholm Syndrome back then, but now it's also called trauma bonding, where they bond with this other person. And it's just basically something natural that sets off inside of us, that tries to make peace with that victim so that victim will stop doing harm, to make peace with that victim. And that's kind of what's really messed up, because it's this natural instinct inside of us. It's like a survival instinct, but still, when you get into these relationships where they are really harming you in a lot of different ways, and even to the point where they can make you physically ill, you know, or to the point where you know, they are really threatening your life, and sometimes even going through with those threats, and be it physically or whatever. And you know, I mean, it just really does a number on a person to an extremely harmful level. Either way, even if they're just threatening about it or whatever, whenever they do a trauma like that, it pushes you down further into their control and into their confinement, you know, and just like they're captives, you know. Be it if you're a man or a woman can do the same thing, you know. Women can be narcissists as well. It doesn't matter. So, I know that's a really tough one that I try to get the grips on. a video I was just listening to stated that, and I am learning myself, that in a lot of these cases, educating yourself, learning about what you're going through, what you're feeling, what's going on inside of you, or what's happening around you. Any videos online, or any information online that you can go to and learn about what you're really going through. You do not have to do it yourself. It is really important for you to join some kind of support. Don't stay isolated and in that fear, because we can get stuck in freeze modes, besides fight or flight. We can do like freeze or fawn too, where freeze and fawn is when we freeze up and we don't do anything, and then we fawn back into letting them do whatever they want to us. So even if after traumas like that happen, like beatings inside relationships, where we can pull away from that person, and we can start living somewhere a different lifestyle or whatever, we can still very much be drawn back to that abusive person, or even get ourselves into another abusive relationship until we learn how to break that trauma bond. And it can even go back to a very early age, where maybe these beatings, or abuse, covert or overt, can happen way back in childhood. But still, a lot of times it does go way back, and we do need to break the biggest trauma bonds that we had with either our mother or father or caretakers, in order to move on into different and better relationships. Because what happens is we break that pattern. We break that trauma cycle, that trauma and the cycle inside of us, what's still happening over and over and over again, and we're playing it out in all of our relationships. I find myself in this predicament. And being that I had sexual abuse as a child as well, I can kind of see myself repeating, even sexually in these relationships, the same beaten cycle over and over again. I'll tell you right now, mine is with an alcoholic. Still trying to break those trauma bonds. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I'm all better now, and but I can kind of maybe help people along the way and guide them with what maybe they need to do, things that I'm working on myself, and things that also work for myself. The trauma bond is supposed to be the worst with narcissistic type people, with that relationship in your life that has that narcissistic person, or a drug or alcohol addict. So I wanted to put that out there. That's just news that I was learning about this morning. And it was very clear, it was stated very clearly, these three things. And I was really amazed and grateful to find this, because it felt like more information that I needed to know at this time. A lot of times information will come to us at a certain time when we really need it. And just to pay attention and take that opportunity to learn more about it if you can. Because the universe will answer questions for you, as long as you're asking them out into, God or the universe or whatever. Those answers will come to you, when you're looking for them. So really taking that opportunity is so important and detrimental for our own well-beings, and even our children, if we have our children. And just better ways that we can teach the public. It doesn't matter. When you try to teach these things to a narcissist, it never works. It's never a good idea, because a lot of times what they'll do is they'll go back into their control tactics, because they can't have you learning about any of this stuff to begin with. that's part of the reason why they keep you beaten down, is because that we fall back into that helplessness and that victim again, and it's hard to come out of that. When you can create space from that other person, even by like starting to get like your own place, or staying with a friend that is not abusive or whatever, and getting back on your feet again and away from these people, it's really important, because then you can do a lot more learning and healing. But you know, that trauma bond is probably the biggest one. Resolving this will take a lot of times meditation, yoga, just practicing mindfulness, a lot more, you know, practicing things that make you feel good, things that you like, and hypnotization. EMDR is a big one, and there are many more. Mine, of course, that I practice right now, because sometimes it can be harder to take ourselves through EMDR, especially if you've suffered any horrific sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, or anything, you know. But mine is really, I stick with the Melanie Tanya Evans program, where she takes you through quantum healing energy, and she uses angels and good things, and you know, it kind of takes you through a more smoother process where you don't have to deal with a lot of negative feelings, because she takes those negative feelings up and away and uses angel work and healing. And so I really like that one. It makes me feel good, and you don't jump into like PSD modes during it, because it's very fast and smooth, which otherwise, when it's bringing up memories, like with EMDR or something like that, or a regular therapy, that's why a lot of times you can move a lot faster using some of these techniques than with regular therapy. Therapy can take years to get over something, if you do it all. And I just wanted to give this, and thank you for listening today, and have a nice day. Peace, everybody. Love ya.